In today's video, I'm going to be discussing Sephiroth in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and going over the question of what is his competitive potential and how to unlock it. So I'm actually going to throw some of my own Sephiroth gameplay in the background of the video so you have some entertainment while I'm discussing Sephiroth and going into the analysis part. So I hope that you enjoy the gameplay in the background. So moving forward, Sephiroth has been out since last December of 2020, so it's been about a year now. So the community has had plenty of time to play test this character. And I know when he first came out, there was a lot of speculation about this character's potential and what he could do in the competitive scene and his viability as a character, as a competitive pick. You know, as time has gone on, it seems like Sephiroth has not lived up to that potential. Now, I'm going to say that it's not because Sephiroth doesn't have the potential, but it's more so that his weaknesses within this game are a bit more subtle and require a lot more skill, I guess you could say, from the person, or a different mindset in combination with skill from the person who is playing Sephiroth. So while Sephiroth hasn't lived up to his potential yet, I want to go over some of the weaknesses that are causing that and then give some potential solutions on how to solve those weaknesses and how to play this character. And then afterwards, I'll go into what makes this character so great and my opinion on what is his competitive potential. So starting with his weaknesses, the ones I have listed are his frame data, the precision on his moves, no out of shield options, limited close range options, and his weight. So I'm going to go into each of these in depth one at a time, starting with his frame data. So if you don't know what frame data is, basically it means how fast does your move come out, and if you hit someone's shield, how quickly can you react afterwards. So in comparison to other characters in the game, Sephiroth has slow frame data. So kind of what that looks like, it basically means that, let's just take Sephiroth's forward tilt for example. So his forward tilt is the one where he does that single slash in front of him and you can tilt it up or down, right? The frame startup on that move is very slow compared to other people's forward tilts in the game. I believe the exact number is like a 14 frame startup on the move, right? Compared to other characters in the game who have a much faster startup on their forward tilt. Now, Sephiroth does have the range, right? So basically what this means... Oh, wait, let me back up just a bit. So he's got the slow frame data on his startup, right? But also, if you hit someone's shield, he can't move fast afterwards compared to other characters. Like, if you hit one of Sephiroth's moves on someone's shield, you were kind of stuck in your animation for longer than other characters are, which basically means that whoever you're facing, depending on your spacing, can actually get a free punish on you for you hitting their shield, right? So what this looks like in a match is basically, if I'm Sephiroth and I throw out my forward tilt, right? If I space it perfectly and I hit your shield, right? So I'm hitting you towards the edge of my sword, you're not going to be able to punish me, which is good, right? Because I spaced it well. However, if my spacing is just even a little bit off, like if I hit you with the middle of my sword, there are some characters in this game, actually potentially a good amount of them, if you space your sword wrong, they are going to hit you, right? Like, you won't be able to move fast enough after your sword hits their shield before they can hit you. Or even if you can move, they're going to be able to basically close the gap really, really fast. And Sephiroth is at his weakest up close, which I'll get to in a bit. And you can basically see this frame data problem in all of his moves, in his forward air, in his back air, even in his up air in certain situations if you manage to hit someone's shield on the ground with it, in his jab, in his neutral air, in his smash attacks, and also in his down tilt. So even Sephiroth's fastest options. So Sephiroth's fastest options are his neutral air and his down tilt. And those both come out on frame 9. However, there's some issues with those because both of these are actually very vulnerable on shield. So I believe like Sephiroth's down tilt where he slides, right? If you hit someone's shield with that, it's like minus 25 on shield. It basically means they're going to be able to turn around and grab you or hit you with some type of move, right? Now you can time the down tilt to where like you'll slide through them and put enough space between you and them where they can't punish you. But once again, I'm going to get into this. This kind of goes into one of his weaknesses of how precise you have to be with the character to use his moves without getting punished. His neutral air, though, even though it is a frame 9, it's pretty fast. It's not one of the fastest options in the game, so you can't use it out of shield. But it's decently fast. It goes well with this kit. However, if you're in the air and someone's on the ground and you hit someone's shield and you space it wrong in the sense of like it's a very short range move, so like the spacing is like, you know, it's a very fine line. If you barely overstep that line, or even if you don't in some situations, if you hit your nair on their shield, they're basically going to be able to get a free punish on you as well. So what I'm getting at is basically that Sephiroth has no safe moves. Like, I mean, his nair is somewhat safe on shield. It is a -5, and if you hit, let me see, like, you know, if you time it to where you're going to land on the ground, it can be a -4. So if you time it perfect, you know, his nair is difficult for an enemy to punish outside of their shield. But like I said, the line there's a very fine line because of how fast the move comes out and how close range it actually is. So it requires a lot of skill from the player playing Sephiroth. So Sephiroth basically doesn't have any powerful, or rather any safe moves on shield. And what ends up happening is that if you watch, you know, a pro player play Sephiroth, you'll see them sometimes just getting punished for throwing out an attack. In my opinion, Smash is a game where a lot of characters get away with just throwing out a bunch of attacks to basically wall out options from an opponent because the opponent may do something. Like, for example, let's say you're playing Lucina and you're on the ground, right? You can throw out Lucina's down tilt because it's so fast and has pretty good range. Like, let's say you're playing versus like a Captain Falcon, let's just say, right? So you think the Captain Falcon, you know, the neutral game's going really fast. You think the Captain Falcon is going to come up and hit you, right, with his dash attack or his side B, whatever, right, because he's a close range character. If you, in the neutral game, you can turn around and do your down tilt really fast to kind of wall out that option or give yourself, you know, so that way if they do it, you're going to hit them with your down tilt, right? But let's say that the Captain Falcon decides he's going to run back the other way, right? So you just throw out your down tilt and it hits nothing. If you're playing Lucina, that's not a big deal because you're going to be able to immediately move afterwards because there's not, for most characters in this game, on a lot of their moves, they can just throw out moves and you don't have much time to punish them afterwards, right? So they can just constantly keep throwing out moves without necessarily having to worry about it. And their moves are also fast startup. I guess I can't blanket statement every character in the game, but if we focus on Lucina, another sword character, her aerials and her tilts are pretty fast, especially her aerials. They're very fast startups, which means that you can kind of wait to the last second, see what your opponent's going to do, and then you can swing your sword to wall them out or hit them, or you can just throw out your sword as an option and you'll be able to move fast enough afterwards so the opponent can't punish you. You can see Sephiroth as the opposite of this. If he throws out a move, right, not only does it come out slow, so you got to be you have to know what's going on in neutral because you can't always wait till the last second. Because if you do, they're going to be too close to you, and their moves will be faster. There's a bunch of reasons why you don't want to wait till the last second, but his moves come out slower. And then also, if you whiff your move, like if you miss it, then your enemy, in some situations, can have ample time to punish you, whereas other characters, that wouldn't be the case. So you'll see this a lot if you watch a competitive Sephiroth play, is that they'll be doing very well, and then they'll miss space literally like one forward air or like one tilt. They don't even miss space it that bad, right? Like they're hitting the enemy with like the tip of their sword, or they barely miss the enemy's head, right? But his frame data is so slow afterwards, especially if they hit their shield, that the enemy can come up and get a free punish on them. So what this means is that Sephiroth has to be incredibly choosy with how he throws out his attacks and his sword, because one wrong mistake and he's going to be punished heavily for it. So you can see him as like a high risk, high reward character, whereas a lot of other characters in this game are kind of high reward, low risk. Now, there are ways to mitigate this risk as Sephiroth, which I'll get into in a bit. But let's go ahead and move on to his second weakness, which is his precision. So Sephiroth's precision, what I mean by this is that his moves require extreme precision because of their frame data and also because of the hitboxes on his moves. So if you want to use his sword at his max range, you're pretty much going to be using his forward air or his side tilt or his up tilt, right? All three of these moves have very thin hitboxes, so your opponent for the most part has to be pretty much directly horizontally in front of you. You can do some like drag downs with his back air and his forward air, but the hitbox lingering isn't that long either. So your opponent directly has to be like directly horizontally in front of you, which means you have to position yourself very well. He's not like other sword characters where like in the air he does like, you know, like Shulk, right, where his moves go all the way around him, or a Lucina where they can cover all these like wide arcs, right? Even though Sephiroth's sword is long, his moves go in a very thin horizontal hitbox. Now, obviously, you know, in the air, he does have his actual up air too, but his up air actually comes out extremely slow. There are ways to use it successfully, which I won't really get into in this video. I'll probably make some videos about each one of his individual moves and go over them in more depth. But his while his slash attacks, in terms of his like, you know, his up air, that move does cover a wide range, right? However, it's only in front of him, though it does hit to the side, but it's a slow startup move, so you can't always use it like you want to. You have to basically space it and be very precise with it to be able to hit it. And that's the same case with his forward air and his back air too, and his forward tilt on the ground. So when you combine the fact that Sephiroth has to be very precise due to his frame data and his actual hitboxes on some of his moves, that means that, one, the character is definitely harder to use, but it also means that if you mess up that precision even once, you may put yourself in a state where the enemy can get a free punish on you due to his frame data. And I'm going to tie all these weaknesses in and how you can combat that after we get through them. So the next weakness is that he has no out of shield options. So what this means is that if you hit my shield as Sephiroth, I typically can't punish you. Like, unless you have a very long cooldown move, you know, obviously there are some moves in the game, like if Shulk hits your shield with his forward smash at a close range, like you're obviously going to be able to get an attack on him or a grab, right? But a lot of people, especially at a higher level, they're going to be hitting your shield up close with like moves that have really good frame data, which means you're not going to be able to punish him. So that means that someone's going to be able to kind of dance around you and constantly hit your shield. You're not really going to be able to do anything about it besides wait until you can kind of reset neutral or get into a state where you can use your sword or your spells with minimal risk. I actually haven't talked about Sephiroth's spells yet, but I'll get into that as well. So yeah, he has no out of shield options, which basically means that he's a lot weaker up close. And when you combine that with his not so great frame data, it basically means that up close, Sephiroth does not have many options, and he doesn't have fast options. Like, if you're up close to me, let's say you're a Mario who has extremely fast, you know, tilts and aerials and whatnot, your moves are basically always going to come out before mine. So I'm pretty much stuck to dodging at that point, right, and trying to get out of your optimal range so I can get back into my range. So up close, due to his no out of shield options, and this is also goes in with his other weakness that I mentioned, which is his limited close range options, that basically up close you can put a lot of pressure on Sephiroth, because his fastest options up close are his jab, which is a frame 5, which is okay, but if someone hits your shield, you have to go through the animations of dropping your shield, and it's really not that fast out of shield. And also his frame 5 is actually, compared to other characters, is actually not that fast. I know that Sakurai specifically mentioned that in his presentation, that his jab compared to other characters wasn't that fast. However, it was one of Sephiroth's fastest options, which is really a testament to the fact that Sephiroth has very slow options. So his other fastest options are his Nair, which is a frame 9, and his down tilt, which is also a frame 9. So these are pretty fast, and they are very good. However, like I said earlier, especially the down tilt, they're not very safe on shield, and obviously they're frame 9, so a lot of moves in the game can actually, they're faster, right? So they can beat them out if you don't space it or time it appropriately. His other weakness, which goes in with all this, is his weight. So Sephiroth is one of the lightest weight characters in the game at 79 units, which is the same as Pikachu. So in my opinion, that's pretty crazy. I understand why they did it from a developer's standpoint in terms of balancing the character. So what this basically means when you combine all these weaknesses is that Sephiroth is a high-risk, high-reward character. He's high reward because obviously he has this massive range, and if you hit them with your sword or your spells, his sword and his spells are basically very strong, right? They do a lot of damage and a lot of knockback. It can set your opponents up into some pretty nasty situations. However, he's high risk. Doesn't mean that you can't mitigate that risk, which we'll get into. But he's high risk in the sense that if you mistime your move or you misspace it, your opponent can get a guaranteed punish on you. It's not just like, hey, your opponent may be able to get a punish on you. It's like, no, your opponent will get a guaranteed, as long as they're good at the game, they will get a guaranteed punish on you because of your frame data. You literally won't be able to move fast enough before they can do something to you. And you combine that with the fact that he's lightweight, means you're in for a difficult time if you're not basically playing perfect and spacing everything extremely well, because your opponent's going to get a free punish on you and you're lightweight. So you may actually die extremely early. So how can you combat these weaknesses of his frame data, his precision, no out of shield options, limited close range options, and his weight? It basically comes down to a combination of game knowledge and game sense, as well as patience. So Sephiroth in some situations is kind of a character where sometimes less can be more. So his sword, while you do want to optimize its range, right? Like you can definitely use its range at an appropriate spacing to force options out of people, right? Because they have to respect your sword and its range and its damage. However, you always want to keep in mind that you have to space it perfectly, because if you don't, they're going to get a free punish. So how you combat these weaknesses is basically having extremely polished gameplay with him. So that means when, if someone's falling through the air and they're coming at you at like a downward angle and you're jumping up as Sephiroth to try to hit with your forward air, right? You got to be able to read that situation in an instant and be like, okay, I have enough spacing, I have enough distance here to throw out this forward air. And even if it misses, if they do a air dodge or something, blah, 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 or if they're on the ground, if you hit them with their shield, I have enough spacing here to where they're not going to be able to get a punish on me. You basically have to be able to read these situations, which, in my opinion, is what's making Sephiroth hard and him not living up to the potential yet that people thought when he first came out. And it sums up to that he's a hard character to play. You can't get away with just throwing out moves like other characters can in this game, because you will be punished. And since you can't get away with throwing out moves, that means you need to be more disciplined and patient, and in some ways have a higher skill level than your opponent. I'm not saying that you have to have a higher skill level, but you have to have a high skill in this game, I guess you could say, to be able to make all those calls at the right time, right? So I think that's why he's struggling right now, is just because of these weaknesses, especially when you pull them together. It requires very precise play, and one mistake can cost you your life or a lot of damage as Sephiroth. So, however, though, all that being said, I do think that his potential is extremely high in this game. I think he is a candidate for one of the best characters in this game. I know some people will disagree, strictly because of the fact that, or for one of the reasons that, he's not consistent. What I mean by that is that since he does have all these weaknesses in his frame data and his precision and no out of shield options and his weight, right, is that since he does require such precision in his kit, that he may not be consistent, because you make one mistake and then boom, you're potentially done. However, I'm going to disagree, because I think that especially offline, where you have more time to react versus online play, that if you bring that level of patience to Sephiroth and the level of gameplay to where you can use his sword while minimizing your risk, which basically means hitting people at the points of your sword and the timings to where they won't be able to punish on you if you hit their shield or you miss, right? And like I said, being able to make those calls is difficult and requires skill. Whereas other characters in the game, if you miss, it's not a big deal, right? As long as they're not hitting you during your animation, you'll be able to roll away or do something else. With Sephiroth, that's not always the case. But yeah, so I do think that his potential is very large, and how you unlock it is basically, you know, with high control over the character and with very good game knowledge and with patience. You basically need to realize that it's not always the right answer to throw out your sword. Other characters, it may be the right answer to throw out some type of an attack, right? Possibly in certain situations. But with Sephiroth, even if you have kind of the advantage and you can throw out your attack, there's sometimes a chance that it's going to slightly miss or they're going to shield it, right? And usually with most characters, that's okay, right? If it slightly misses or they shield, right? But with Sephiroth, in certain situations, as I've been saying, this is not okay because you will be punished. So you have to be able to make those calls very, very well. And then you also, to bring out his potential, you have to realize that part of his kit, it's very strange. Like his down tilt, right? That slides forward, and his nair. You know, both of these moves are close range moves. I mean, technically you could consider his down tilt a long range move because you slide so far, but it puts you close to your opponent, right? And then his nair, also you need to be close to your opponent. Being close to your opponent is actually the area where Sephiroth, if you're not in a state of advantage anyways, is the weakest because of his slow frame data. He loses access to basically all of his moves besides his frame 5 jab, his frame 9 nair, and his frame 9 down tilt, which once again aren't that fast of options, especially out of shield. There are different ways to use his down tilt. You know, you can actually use it to create some space between you and your opponent too. And, you know, so like, I'm not saying his nair or his down tilt are bad, but they do put you really close to your enemy. So if you don't know how to play close to your enemy as Sephiroth, you're going to put yourself in a state of disadvantage and get yourself punished. So once again, his moves require a lot of game knowledge, you know, basically when do you use that down tilt. You know, some Sephiroth players, after they hit you with their side B, they're going to go immediately into down tilt. Now, this can be good, right? If your enemy, once they get hit, they're going to try to rush forward at you, so you can catch them off guard. However, in those situations, you may as well just throw out your forward tilt, right, instead of your down tilt, because if your down tilt hits their shield, depending on the spacing, you're going to get punished and you put yourself up close to them, right, where you're at your weakest. So Sephiroth comes down to knowing when to use what move, right? Because as I said, even his forward tilt, if you use it at the wrong spacing, it can be punished, right? So you got to know when to use your forward tilt or when to back away, when to let them come in after your tilt and hit them with your jab, right? Because, you know, that actually is a pretty good option. When you do your forward tilt and hits their shield and they're going to come running in after you, you could throw out some, like, jabs, right? Because if they don't come in after you, you know, your jab, you can move fast enough afterwards. Whereas if you do your forward tilt, I mean, your down tilt after your forward tilt, you know, if they come in after you, you could hit them with your down tilt, but if they don't, right, and they decide to hold their ground or do a backdash and you forward tilted after them, then now you can put yourself in a state of disadvantage. So Sephiroth requires like a lot of just game knowledge and precision to use his moves, right? Which is going to be a struggle for a lot of characters. So in my opinion, he's a very high skill cap character. But some of the other reasons why I believe his potential is so high is that, so obviously it's his range on his sword, right? It's the damage on his sword and the knockback on his sword. But then also, Sephiroth has in his special moves some very unique traits. So all of his special moves outside of his down B, which is his counter, all of his special moves, you can change their timings. So his up B, right, he has two versions of it. He has the instant one, which is the regular, whatever it's called, blade dash, and then the charge one, which is the octo slash. So depending on whether you do the instant one or the charged one, your travel distance changes and your timing in which the move releases also changes. And then also you can make the move go in any direction that you want. His side B, you can charge it up to 1, 2, or 3 blasts, which changes the timing of the move. You can also, at the point of release, have it release the other way. His neutral B, you can charge it up to 3 different variations. And while you're charging it up, you can cancel the animation at any time with a dodge roll or a jump, which is very powerful too. So, like I said, I'm not going to go into every single move into complete detail. I'll make different videos on that. But what I'm getting at is that you can mess with the timings of Sephiroth's moves. So you can see it as a smash attack, right? Where you can hold it and charge it, but on his special moves. So since you can mess with it with the timing, this brings a lot of variability into Sephiroth's play, which can throw your opponents off if you use them properly, right? So, and then also, of course, once he's at high enough damage or low enough stocks, he will get his one-winged angel form, which gives him more speed and mobility, as well as more damage, and he gets some hyper armor on his smash attacks, which is very useful in certain situations once you figure out how to use the hyper armor. So, to wrap it up, I do think that Sephiroth is very strong in this game. Very, very, very strong. The only reason that he may not be seeing as high results as some people envisioned when he first came out is just because of how hard the character is, of how high of a skill cap he has, in the sense that, as I said, he's a high risk, high reward character. You can see him like in other games. I think they call those characters glass cannons, right? Which is basically they do a lot of damage, they can explode you instantly, but you can also explode them instantly. And Sephiroth's that case in this game, not only because of his lightweight, but because, like I said, because of his frame data and the precision required on all of his moves. If you mess that up even just once, you will be punished. So when you take all of that into consideration, as I just said, he's a very difficult character to play and to unlock the potential with him, especially if you're playing versus an enemy who's of an equal skill level to you, right? So in the competitive scene, right, when you're playing versus an opponent who's of equal skill level, it's going to be hard to have this precision at every point of the match. But as long as you have the discipline and the game knowledge to know when you can throw out an attack, when it's safe, and the patience to be able to make those calls, to be like, hey, I don't need to throw out something right here. I'll let them have their advantage right now and focus on just dodging, right? Focus on resetting. Or I won't throw out something here and I'll wait till we're on the ground or whatever, and I'll throw out a jab, right? So your sword with Sephiroth isn't always the answer. His spells are good enough, especially his side B, though it doesn't have as big of a hitbox, in some ways anyways, to where you can actually, use your spells and your neutral air to fight them, right? So Sephiroth has a lot of different styles of play, but once again, all of his styles of play in some ways require extreme precision, because if you mess it up, like even his side B that comes out fast, if you hit someone's shield up close with it, they can actually grab you right afterwards. So all of his moves, like Sephiroth can change up his style of play. He's a very adaptable character. It just requires a lot of skill to make that adaptability and his moves work. And honestly, I think that was a very good balancing choice that the developing team made when they designed Sephiroth, is that they realized probably that if played at a very optimal level, that he is a very oppressive character. He is an extremely strong character. However, they balanced it. They're like, hey, if you can't make the right choice all the time, right? Or if you make one wrong choice as Sephiroth, they gave the enemy ample time to punish you for it. So I think that was actually, and then they also gave him the lightweight to where, it only takes 1, 2, or 3 mess ups for you to lose your actual stock. So I think that was a good balancing decision, because the more I play Sephiroth, the more I realize that, hey, if I play this optimally, it's going to be really hard for anyone to do anything. But if I don't play it optimally, then I'm going to be in for a rough time. So that's my thoughts on Sephiroth's viability in the competitive scene. Actually, I'm not sure if I stated that. Basically, I do think he's a very viable character and a contender for one of the top characters in the game. Maybe I'll make a video going over the top characters and who could be the best, or why some characters are even, but not right now. But in terms of his competitive viability, I do think he is extremely viable. It's just that he's going to take a lot of skill, and he's not like a typical Smash character where you can just throw out all these hitboxes constantly and not be punished for it, right? He has a different style of play. It's just how, like, Kazuya in this game, he's like a Smash character, but a Tekken character at the same time. You know, if you ever played Kazi in this game, he just feels different. You have to play him different too. That's the same case with Sephiroth, right? He, due to his frame data and the way that they designed him and balanced him, you have to play a different game with Sephiroth. You have to be very precise and very deliberate with how you use your moves. And if you can master that, you can definitely unlock Sephiroth's potential in this game. And if you do, as I said, he is one of the best characters in this game.
Sephiroth wins!